Hi everyone, my name is Louis Gebhardt, and this is my multimedia timeline presentation for ELL 515. Welcome. In this presentation, I'll walk through 12 different key events, laws, and court cases that shaped bilingual education and English learner policy in the United States. And I will include a special focus on Arizona. By looking at these 12 events chronologically, we'll be able to see the history and politics of language education and how they have and continue to influence the programs that we have here today in America. All right, before the 20th century, pre 1900, in the early days of the United States, it was common for immigrant communities to run schools in their home languages. For instance, immigrants speaking languages like German or Dutch. These schools reflected a time when multilingualism was a natural part of education and was not seen as something as so much of a problem, which this shows us that bilingual education isn't something entirely new and that it has deep roots in American history. Included here are some pictures that portray what those schools look like at that time. Before the 20th century, when the United States took over the Southwest after the Mexican American War, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo promised to protect the rights of Mexican citizens, including their language. But in reality, schools quickly shifted towards English only instruction, which pushed Spanish speakers to the margins. This was an early example of how policy and practice didn't always match, and how language rights could be promised but were not honored. Included here is a map of the U.S. and Mexican border during that time. During the late 1800s, the federal government created Native American boarding schools, and these schools were designed to assimilate Native children into white culture, and English only policies were very strictly enforced. In these schools, students were often punished for speaking in their home languages, which is sad. And this was one of the harshest examples of how schools were used to suppress linguistic and cultural diversity. And you can see an image of "Kill the Indian, Save the Man" in the top one, and then the description of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School there as well. Early 20th century. In 1923, the Supreme Court ruled in Meyer versus Nebraska that states could not ban foreign language instruction. The case came after Nebraska tried to outlaw teaching in German following World War I. The court's decision protected the rights of communities to teach and learn in their heritage languages, and it set an important, very important legal precedent for language rights in education moving into the future. Okay, during the early 20th century, schools ran what were called Americanization programs. These were efforts to assimilate immigrants, especially after World War I. The focus here was on English only instruction and making sure students adopt mainstream American culture. While they may have helped some families adjust in certain ways, these programs also very much narrowed educational opportunities by discouraging bilingualism. Here are some of the banners that you might have seen during that time of history. Early 20th century. In the 1940s, a large migration of Puerto Ricans to the United States mainland, especially in New York, led schools to experiment with different bilingual programs. Included here are two pictures from Puerto Rican families arriving in New York. Now, these bilingual programs were transitional in that they supported Spanish speakers as they learned English. And this was one of the first times we see bilingual education linked directly to a growing student population and different shifting demographics. Later 20th century, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was a turning point in United States education. Title VI prohibited discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. For English learners, this meant schools had to provide services and could not deny enrollment based on language or based on immigration status. Title VI became the legal backbone for many later cases and policies supporting English learners. Here on this slide is different pictures of the hero Martin Luther King Jr. and some famous photos. And then just a decade later, the Lau versus Nichols case in San Francisco made major history. Chinese American students argued that they weren't receiving meaningful access to education because they didn't understand English. The Supreme Court ruled that giving students the same instruction in English simply and plainly wasn't enough. But schools needed and had to take steps towards actually helping English learners learn. This case solidified the principle that equal does not always mean equitable. All right, continuing in later 20th century, and here we see a picture of the Washington Capitol. Um, the Bilingual Education Act was the first federal law that directly supported bilingual programs. This law provided funding to districts serving English learners and recognized that students' home languages could be an asset in learning. For many schools, this made bilingual programs possible, and it showed a growing acknowledgement that English learners needed targeted support to succeed. In the year 2000, Arizona voters passed Proposition 203. This required that English learner students be taught only in English. And this law completely dismantled most bilingual programs in the state and replaced them with structured English immersion, or SEI. Even though later laws have softened some restrictions, Proposition 203 is still technically in effect today, and this makes Arizona one of the most restrictive states for bilingual education. Very unfortunate. Flores versus Arizona. This is a court case that stretched over 20 years. Parents in Nogales, and here's a picture of the courtroom there. But parents here argued that their children weren't getting proper English learning services, and they weren't getting funding. After many appeals, the court eventually ruled that Arizona had made enough progress in supporting English learners. This case highlights how long legal battles over funding and equity can last, and how persistent families must be to secure fair treatment for all. So finally, in 2019, Arizona passed Senate Bill 1014. And this law reduced the rigid 4-hour English block down to 2 hours for elementary students and reduced it down to 100 minutes for older students. It also allowed schools more flexibility by including the option to start dual language programs. While Proposition 203 still requires English only instruction for part of the day, this law opened new possibilities, and it also reflected a growing recognition of bilingualism as an asset. Concluding, in summary, these 12 events show how language education in the United States has been shaped and how it's evolved by both national movements and Arizona specific laws. From all the way from early multilingual schools to English-only restrictions, to today's mix of SEI and bilingual models. The story is one of tension between assimilation and inclusion. As educators, understanding this history helps us recognize why programs look the way they do and how we can advocate for equitable opportunities for our students moving forward. Here are the references I used for this module and for this presentation. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.